Blog Talk Radio.
Can you hear me now? Not sure if this thing's working. Blog Talk Radio's been kind of chunky and out. I'm trying to see what we got going on. I'm being told I can be heard. Let's see if I can get it on this side. It says the host waiting for the host to call back in, but that's me. I'm called in. So BGR is having some chunks. Oh, there it is. All right. So it seems like we're finally broadcasting. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Dana, can you hear me? You should be able to speak and come online. Okay, I don't hear you speaking. Trying to get a hold of you here. Talk to you on Facebook for a second. If those people out there listening, what the heck's going on? Blog Talk Radio was having some chunks. I'm seemingly into the show. It seems to be broadcasting. Seem to be hearing it okay coming through my online setup. Okay, let me see if I can get her in. Put you on hold for a minute and then bring you back live and see.
Hello?
There you go. I got you now.
All right.
With some propane tonight.
It kept telling me muted, unmuted, muted, unmuted, and you're saying, I can't hear you.
Well, it connected me. I've been waiting for the online direct connect to connect me in. For about half an hour. It's just been sitting here ringing, not connecting. I tried the phone, and I don't get a connection at all with the phone. So I've been, bouncing around, trying to get around. How long were you on? Did you call in and were waiting? Wasn't even paying attention to the queue at first.
Actually, when I looked at my phone, when it called me back, I realized, because I thought that I had hung up on it, that's why I was laughing, because it was just too funny.
Right.
I thought I had hung up on it, so it was sitting there for about 9 or 10 minutes, just out in it was snazzy music, though. That was some really snazzy, elevator. Felt like I was going up high somewhere.
I say we'll have to listen. Yeah, we'll have to listen to the archive, because it may have recorded anything you were saying in the background.
Oh, right on. We're talking to my husband and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, when I popped over, it showed you in. It didn't show me at all. It said the host had connected, although I hadn't. Although I tried to, but I couldn't get through. And then it showed you on, with a hot mic. I'm thinking, okay, well, whatever she said went live over the air. But it shows us as an hour and 26. So, yeah, it might be an archive. So we might have to do a little editing.
Yeah, we might want to make sure that there's nothing that the government doesn't want to hear.
So anyways, yeah, it looks like we actually get to do a show tonight. They must have heard me ranting a little bit about Spreaker.
Right on. That's why I messaged you free stuff.
Right. And I'm still thinking about it, I still very well. For those wondering what the hell I'm talking about, we were talking when we were having this issue. This is the 4th week in a row. Blog Talk Radio seems to have a crash going on with their host call-in system, and, you couldn't connect and have a show or what have you. So, I've been thinking about switching over to Spreaker here, and tonight this happened, and we were just telling Dana I may be flopping over to Spreaker anyways, and then all of a sudden I pop over and the show's ready to go and kind of broadcasting, even though I'm not connected.
It could have been my
weird
conspiracy theory comment.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been my conspiracy theory comment.
Oh, it could have been that too. Yeah, hell yeah. NSA may have pulled some strings. Oh, wait a minute, we got to hear what these patriots are saying. We got to put them on the list.
That woman's catching on. She keeps talking to us when she's on the phone with people.
Right. So yeah, I figured we'd pick up where we started off, or left off last night a little bit, at least in what I was talking about, and this, perception deception that we got going on, and today, in Michigan, all over the TV, all over the news, and live was, the affair in legislation.
Oh, yes.
Meanwhile, they're still trying to push through the tax bill that we all denied on, May 5th, and still pushing forward with that, still pushing forward with the tyranny that's coming down the pike in the Medical Marijuana Act called the Provisioning Centers and Edibles Bill. So, yeah, this perception deception here. This is kind of an interesting day because that's all we heard about in Michigan, but you can bet there was a lot more going on than just that.
Oh, yes.
I don't remember any court stopping today.
No court stopped. Nothing stopped. And, hey, but you know what? While they were doing this, at least they weren't enacting any new laws. Think it through, at least in that committee.
Well, in that committee, sure, but, what about the other committees that were enacting laws that weren't there?
Right.
Those are the ones I'm wondering about, what got through that we weren't paying attention to because the affair, those dirty Republicans.
This is actually going to put a little hammer in the nail of the coffin of the actual true Tea Party people. That's the sad part.
Yep.
Because there's a group of us that are actual true Ron Paul Tea Party people. Not Republicans. We are Tea Partiers. We are Ron Paul people. We know what Ron Paul has to say. We know everything that he says. And every reason he voted no the whole time in Congress was because he knew the Constitution. And that's why it was supposed to be tyrannized enough already. It wasn't supposed to be this whole Republican thing. Then the Republicans took it over. And then they started having their little Tea Party powwows down in your area, your neck of the woods, Mount Pleasant.
Yep.
And a lot of us were saying it was an unholy alliance between Campaign for Liberty and the Republicans and the Tea Party. And it kind of did become an unholy alliance.
They all
There was a lot of campaigning going on. And two of them that started the whole Tea Party powwow became the representatives Courser and Gamrat. So this is a devastating blow to liberty, kind of. I mean, and then when Courser said we're going to inoculate the herd, well, excuse me, sir, but you were all about the Constitution and liberty and, Christianity and living morally. And let's see, you're going to inoculate what? And that's so it is big news, but, yes, there's many things going on.
Yeah, I mean.
And my representative, PDP, loves the gas tax, and he's on the Transportation Committee, and he loves to be like a total tyrannist.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I was saying earlier. We're hearing about this, but in the background, somebody's making a deal on the gas tax that we all on May 5th said, go to hell.
And one of his favorite parts of that is he wants to end all of the permanent plates. So anyone who's bought a permanent plate, you paid for that. It was guaranteed to you under Granholm. Fight for it. Keep it. PDP cannot get his way if you do not allow him.
Yep. Well, I mean, this is one of the things that, in a way, I know this is going to sound batshit crazy, probably even to you and a lot of other people, but in a way, our government is working best almost right now because it's so polarized on each side of the fence that almost nothing can get done in any timely manner, and which buys us time to act against it. Which is why I was telling you a month ago or so, when I vote for the biggest contention. What is going to cause the biggest strife in local, state, and federal government, and that's where I'm voting for, because the more they're fighting and eating each other, the less they're working to eat us.
Yes. I agree with you on that one.
We got
in a way, I agree with you. Because we do get that. We get that gridlock. We get that fight, but somehow the heavy things come through. TPP. Here in Michigan, SB 60. Come on, man.
Yeah.
2 weeks it took to pass that bad boy.
Right.
They can't even have coffee and donuts in 2 weeks sometimes in committee, especially with the edibles bill that's so great, don't you know?
Right. And
2 years compared to 2 weeks. So, yeah.
Right.
That's what I said. I mean, sometimes we can gridlock them, but sometimes they just really do lockstep with each other and
well, that's it.
Totally screw us.
That's exactly it. Because
that's where the whole facade comes in, you know.
Well, with tomorrow being September 11th, we only got to go back 14 years and look at how the Patriot Act came in and how fast it came in. Very few people are aware that bill was sitting in a drawer for 2 to 4 years before, if not 10 years before 9/11 came around, for that bill to come out and say this is what we must do.
And then once it came out,
they the PNAC report.
And once it came out,
they New American Century.
And they had the NDAA sitting right there too, and that came right, boom, 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 right in its heels.
Yep.
Where you and I are.
Who didn't vote for the NDAA amongst all the candidates out there? There's almost none. Ron Paul was one who didn't vote for it, and there was a few others.
Rand Paul. Ron Paul's his dad.
In 2012, but we're talking in 2001 when it first came up.
Oh, well, that would have been Ron Paul. Yes, my bad. My bad. Shoot me for being a smart aleck.
But with that being said, they're all puppets. They all, even Ron in a way. There's a lot of things that Ron has spoke to that's very well suited, but I almost see him as another controlled plant. In the big picture, looking at the dots as you step away from him, he's almost playing a role. And is it a role that he willingly is playing, or is it somebody playing him and just using him for the role he's, presenting? That's the big question. But, in this idea that, the SB 660, which just flew right through, this is a pretty example of what's happening locally. Everybody's pretty aware on this side of the fence what SB 660 is, the Rick Jones thing, and it's about, pretty good. I'm not so familiar with it anymore because I've quit caring about it.
Well, basically, if the feds deschedule cannabis, marijuana, whatever you want to call it, if they deschedule it, they will...
Well, is it deschedule or reschedule?
No, either way. If it becomes an either unscheduled or a different type of scheduled drug, then it will be divided into 10 regions, blah, blah, blah. Prairie Plant Systems is going to be in there. Now, they try to say that you will have... It's basically the MCC bill. I think it's MRC. With the 10 regions and the 10 zones and whatnot.
Ohio is pushing the same thing with 10 state government. Yeah,
and it actually has a real law name now. I just always still call it SB 660. I'm about to find that right here. SB 660. It is Public Act number 268 of 2013. Yeah, but it brings that Prairie Plant Systems in here. It says you can still have a caregiver and all these things, but you have two choices. You either... when you do the back of your medical marijuana card, flip it over, guys, and it says either you're a caregiver and you can possess plants, or you have a caregiver and it's got your caregiver's name on it. There'll be a third card that says no caregiver dispensary. So you have three choices. You go through a dispensary, you go through a caregiver, or you grow your own. It limits you, and once you sign up for that, you have to put all the changes through and things like that to change it. So 660 is not a happy thing, or Public Act 268. We should start calling it that, 268.
Public Act 268.
Yes.
Good enough to remember. Good enough to remember.
Yes, we should. I've just been calling it SB 660 for 2 or 3 years now. I never even bothered,
that's what most people are aware of it as.
Well, yeah, because it was just amazing that it went through so quick. I mean, that was getting out of committee. I mean, literally, people have to think this through. That was someone writing a bill, proposing the bill in committee, and then getting it through committee, through the House, through the Senate, Senate first, SB, so through the Senate, through the House, and then on to the governor's desk and signed in 2 weeks.
Correct. And that does not happen without pre-planning, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll refer back to the quote by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. If it happened in politics, it was planned to happen. So if it's political and it went through, it's been planned. And 2 weeks is not planning in government. That's bringing it out of the desk, blowing the dust off it and running it through, because it's been tried before a few times probably. If we really look back, we'll probably see something like this has already been presented in some different version.
Right. It's either been presented or they've talked about it.
So is this...
Hang on, I got to put you on mute.
Okay. the thing I want to have you look at when you come back, and I'll talk to the other people here, is 660 strictly on the federal redistribution, rescheduling, or would it affect us on the state level? That's an interesting idea. We'll have to find out as soon as Dana gets back. That's something that could, I think, is strictly on the federal level.
Sorry, your guest host is sitting right now.
No problem.
So the dad just came to pick up the child.
Okay. No, I was just, explaining to the listeners out there. This is strictly a federal position, or does this change if they redo something in the state as well? With
this just happens when the feds change their position.
Okay, so it's
it specifically says when it gets descheduled, because they're not, Lansing right now at the moment doesn't realize that they can do whatever they want with it. They still think they have to wait for the feds.
Right.
So,
but it is highlighted as, descheduled at the federal level.
Right.
That's enunciated, okay.
That's why you guys will see me warn people. Don't ask for descheduling. That makes SB 660 kick in.
Especially on the federal level, right. I mean, in a way, we are descheduling, but we're doing it at state level.
Yeah, we're doing it differently. We're not calling it
done in the current modern perversion of what we call a republic.
Right.
I always refer back to, I like taking the stick away from the bully and beating them with it. Now, the idea of giving individuals the individual right to vote, as our founding fathers put it, was insane. They knew it would lead to mob rules, and the mob is woefully uneducated, sadly. It's kind of the part of the double-edged sword. They've been purposely uneducated, and their perception's been deceived on purpose, so they're easily to distract and move to the right or left as you want them to. But with that sword that came in that is being used against us, they're letting us use our own sword against us, with some knowledge and some information and some realization, and backing away from the picture and losing the perspective of the dot and seeing the dots that make the line or the shadowed areas. You get to see that bigger picture, and then you can really understand how to take that, stick, that sword that we've been using against ourselves, and turn it back against the king.
And we can put this in kind of a perspective with something that just recently happened, and please forgive me if I upset you where I'm about to go. The Supreme Court just made a decision regarding homosexual marriage. And I'm not telling you if I'm for or against it, because I could really care less what anyone does in their bedroom.
Exactly.
I could care less. One of my sons is gay, and my cousin is gay, so I'm not against it. I'm cool. But what I'm against is the fact that even the gay people got their rights taken. They did. Mm-hmm. Because what they were told is that no matter what your constitution in your state says, no matter what your state law says, and no matter if there's no federal law at all, the Supreme Court makes law.
Correct.
So that means, let's say we win this cannabis thing. We win it. We're good. We have abrogated everything, which means they're going to target us first. They're going to be like, wait a minute, Colorado and all those other guys, all they did was legalize it. We're all good with that. We still get to control things, and we still get to come in and raid every once in a while and make a little federal dollar on the side, But now these Michigan people, don't you know?
The state can turn into the nanny, so the federal don't have to be.
Right. So then they're going to be like, well, Michigan, they've taken all of our rights away. They said that we don't belong there. We have to fight that. So then they're going to challenge it at the Supreme Court level. They have that right. Or another state is going to challenge us at the Supreme Court level. So all of those people that are cheering the Supreme Court on right now and saying that Kim Davis should be in jail, that could be you someday over cannabis.
Absolutely. This is absolutely a state and a personal rights issue. And I agree. I mean, I don't agree with her using the religious doctrine to beat her own personal idea, but I don't disagree with what exactly she has done, because she wasn't just not giving marriage licenses to possibly gay people. She wasn't giving marriage licenses to anybody.
Which is exactly what she should have done. That is called civil disobedience, and that is called nullifying the permission slips. That is where she was dead on. If she would have just shut her mouth about being a Christian, and she would have just said, look, this is not a power of the government at all to make me beg for permission to have my little name on a little document, therefore I'm not giving out any documents. She wasn't giving out any documents. But because Mike Huckabee swooped in and wanted to make himself some little campaign happies, it became a Christian thing, and it was all about homosexuals. And no, she wasn't allowing anyone to get one.
Now it's getting the right-wing media spin, which is going to play into the left-wing media propaganda. And we're going to have more dichotomy about people hating each other instead of watching the government plow everybody else's paint.
And meanwhile, everyone is going to follow a Supreme Court opinion. I have heard, because I argue it. I've been arguing it and arguing it. I've been on Facebook activism overload right now because I am trying to troll out every person who is putting that on their stuff, because they have to realize Supreme Court does not make rules. They do not make laws. This lady broke no law. She was following the Kentucky Constitution.
She was.
Period. Even if she was just discriminating against gays. The Kentucky Constitution defines it as man and woman, just as the Michigan one does. And I saw a lady come on. She was a Muskegon County clerk. Oh, I'm going to do exactly what they said because I'm supposed to, because I took an oath. Well, no. You can read the oath. Article 11, Section 1. Oath of public officers. All officers, legislative, executive, and judicial, before entering upon the duties of their respective offices, shall take and subscribe the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, Neil. Sorry. Okay, come by. That was real professional, I know. But
it's all good.
I have a life, too. I was babysitting this cute little boy today. But I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution according of this state, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of blank according to the best of my ability. See? Best of my ability. Okay?
Correct.
No other oath, affirmation, or any religious test shall be required as a qualification for any office or public trust. So the lady in Muskegon, who says she's going to uphold this unconstitutional Supreme Court opinion with a very good dissenting opinion that everyone should read, she's sworn to uphold the Michigan Constitution. And that's that. And the 10th Amendment protects her.
Correct. I mean, these are pretty basic, really fundamentally basic things, but we have been led down this idea that they're tricky and they're, hard to fathom, and, as I've been saying, you're just not paper trained correctly and authorized to understand that, so therefore don't worry about it. We'll tell you what it is. And this is that deception perception, this idea that, oh, you're just a bartender, or you're just a, sales guy, or you're just a cable guy, or you're just this, or you're just that, and you can't know anything about something else is patently ridiculous. I mean, patently ridiculous. But when when we've taught everybody to focus on one or two of the dots and ignore the other dots, or appeal to the, paper-trained people of the other dots as if it's some mystical thing that they'll never understand, people are easy to manipulate, so easy to manipulate after that.
Oh, yes. And it's happened many, many times. I sometimes say we're in a self-imposed dark age. We have so much at our fingertips, so much we can learn. I mean, we're in such a huge space. But, people would rather, instead of learning about the truth, turn on their TV. And what's on TV right now? Love the authority. Oh, the doctors are great. Oh, the cops are great. Oh, the lawyers are great. Everything, every show. I mean, at least when I used to have TV, every show, and I even mentioned it to my husband, do you realize everything we watch is either about a lawyer, a courtroom, a doctor, or a freaking cop?
Yep. All of it.
Even Sons of Anarchy, which was loosely, very loosely based on a bike gang, had all three in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all about dumbing you down and letting you know, well, it's okay for Sergeant whatever to look in that box up there and then pretend later that it was on the search warrant. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it had nothing to do with what the real bikers were, which is actually a group of World War II vets who knew what the hell was going on. That's what the original bikers come out of the 50s. They were World War II vets who come back with all their bikes that they had in World War II they rode.
Oh, yeah. I mean, God, back in that day, they were racing it, or everybody had a bike. Women did. There were the motor maids. There's a woman in Interlaken who was one of the original motor maids. Her name is Shirley, and they own Cyclemore. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Nope.
She was one of the original biker motor maids. The women's motorcycle club. They were very proper women. They wore their little kerchiefs and she's still pretty proper. You cuss in front of Shirley, she'll almost wash her mouth out with soap, and you're a big biker dude.
Right.
And she is just a wonderful woman, and yeah, that's what it was. But then the government started saying, those bad bikers, and that's when people started coming back from Vietnam, and that's when the 1%ers started.
Right, those bad bikers were ex-World War II vets speaking out, and ex-Korean War vets at that time saying, whoa, hold on, government, that's not exactly the deal, and you know it, and we know it.
And anybody who's ever grown up in the biker culture will realize that's why it's so hard for me to fathom and why it was so easy for me to come into the training that I've come into.
The new bikers
because
are just the old cowboys.
Right, it was like we never, no drug was ever really bad per se. You know, we knew that was what was going on and that was what it was, and it was just never bad to us. I saw it growing up, young. And so therefore, we were raised just to be a little bit different than everyone else. And the real world wasn't the
falling
almighty
apart.
thing, I guess is the best way to say it. You know what I mean?
Yes, I get you.
I know you do, but I don't know if I'm saying it for the other people right. I mean, I could talk about freedom and liberty better than I can talk about my own life growing up. It was a totally different world, and that's why I can't fathom people who are like, right. I have to let my bag get searched by this police officer that I was never taught was a good person ever in my life. Mm-hmm. It is whatever it is now. It's like, no.
Right. I mean, yeah.
I've always, my whole life, gotten nervous when a cop pulls up, even when I was 10.
Yep. A lot
Somebody's
of us,
going to jail, and it's not going to be a good day.
Right.
I mean,
I'm just south of 50. So I grew up, and I'm the beginning of the Generation X, end of the baby boomers. So yeah, that whole hippie culture, and I mean that was the in thing when I was growing up. Bell-bottom jeans and peace and love and fries and all the other hippie stuff. But it was more about the hippie thing. It was a lot of awareness. But in the late 70s, things started changing even in the hippie culture. The hippie culture became the yuppie culture of the 80s,
yes.
the 90s, and the me generation. Where it only matters what I get. Oh, Bob next door got a new Lincoln. Well, I need to go get a new Cadillac.
Because I watched my biker father fall into that for a while.
I watched half
for
my
a long
family,
while, and we still argue about
things. I watched some of my family go to that side, and some of my family stay to the, kind of the biker outlaw side. And it was a funny thing to watch from my perspective, being, at my side, I'm the youngest of 5, and closest one to me was 7 years older than me. So I always grew up, I was always hanging out with my brothers and sisters, so I was always hanging out with people older than I was. It was just kind of funny to watch, as I'm growing up, how these things changed to the late 70s and 80s. One of the things I can distinctly remember being, from kindergarten to 5th grade. And you do it that way because I moved from 5th grade out of Bay County into Midland County, a whole 26 miles. But the entire education world was completely different between the two counties, between Bay City and Midland. Now, at Bay County, growing up in the 70s, up until 77 when we moved, I was told, we were all told, my entire generation, we're going to be the generation that explores space. We're going to be the generation that does the next great things and makes the next great advances. And by the time I got to high school and junior high over in Midland County, just years later in the late 70s, it was your generation is going to be the next middle management for the labor. That's going to be everybody else, all the poor people in the other nations are going to be doing, and we need you, train you to go run those businesses.
Now I'm going to tie those dots together. I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to tie those dots together for you.
Yep.
You know what else happened in the late 70s and early 80s? No, it was the late 70s.
A lot of things.
There was the UN was starting to do more of its stuff, and they came up with a whole new field of study that was a made-up field of study, and you can look this up. Go to AmericanPolicyCenter.org and do their webinars. It's amazing, and I can't even remember what the name of it. It has to do with engineering, environmental engineering, or something like that, and it was a made-up science. I mean, I know this is bad to do this. I did it again.
Is that what you're talking about?
On air, I'm sitting here trying to give a roundabout thing, but it's an American Policy Center, and it is amazing when they made this whole new science, and that's when, and it wasn't even recognized, and people fought against it, but not as hard as they should have, and that's now what's behind all of your planning and zoning and how we can't have a wood stove and all of those things, and it's those dots. It's right at that time, the Prussian education system had finally taken hold. We'd finally had enough generations dumbed down that they could do it. Mom and Dad were busy working. They weren't paying attention to what they were teaching you.
Right. I would say not so much enough. I mean, enough generations dumbed down, but I would relate it more around to the point of enough generations pacified with the good life to not worry about things going on because they seemingly are going so well. And so in that respect, like you said, everybody was busy working, and busy taking care of what they had to take care of, giving their kids a good college education, so, you didn't have to be the road worker, you could be the doctor, and, again, that whole, in my idea, my opinion is the whole deceptive path that was instilled to us to take us from being, the next achievers to the next middle management people.
And do you remember at that point in time that were your parents, like, all of a sudden that used to be out doing things, coming home from work extra tired and watching TV every day?
Well, it was.
Did that happen in your world? Because that was my world. That's.
My parents were never TV people. I mean, we were always somewhere, whether that was snowmobiling or out in public or at a picnic or at a family reunion, a family wedding, a family funeral. We were always somewhere. TV was something that I did on Saturday mornings and everybody caught the news with, and that was about it. It wasn't until the late 70s. By then, everybody else had moved out. It was just me and my mom and my dad then. TV started becoming a little bit more. The old man got a job at Billy Bechtel working at the nuclear plant here in Midland, at the Dow Chemical area where they were going to put the nuclear plant in the 80s. But the ground proved insufficiently sustainable to hold the weight, and one side of the cooling tower pad kept sinking 6 inches in a 6-month period over 2 years, so they had to scrap the whole thing because the damn thing would have sunk into the flipping ground and caused a meltdown.
No, it's just, I remember being young, and my parents were both really active, and they were potheads, and they rode, and we camped, and we did things, and then somewhere around my teen years, so mid-'80s was for me. All of a sudden, we still did things on the weekends and then during the summer, but my parents had their programs. We had MASH, and we had Dallas, and we had whatever, the Dukes of Hazzards, the A-Team. I mean, Friday night was hanging out in front of the TV. That was weird, and and people still do it today, but I don't.
Yeah. Well, my life.
But that was that dumbing down. That was that deliberate. They're too busy watching this shiny bauble show.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on up to the top. In my life, because I've kind of walked my own path. I went into telecommunications and working in in the mid '80s. It was a very lucrative job. I started out right out of high school at a job at $14.50 an hour as a shovel grunt. In 6 months, was running a boring machine, boring underneath the roads, and was making $20 an hour. They paid very good back then. But in my time in that experience, throughout the 30 years since then, I met a lot of different people. Because I went from that into the cable industry, because it was expanding huge in the 80s. I mean, everybody was getting cable and satellite TV, and this idea of the TV explosion. So
we got MTV, remember?
Yeah, well, I was a part of building the actual beast, as I call it now. The internet's kind of the same way, because it's got us so entrained on being in front of the TV instead of being in front of each other, or the computer screen, instead of being in front of each other, because if we're pacified by sitting here, we're not out there. And there's a very real truth to that. But, again, using that bully's club against them, we could utilize the time online, which is what I come to a realization to. You utilize the time online to create enough motivation to get off our asses and get outline for everybody who's stuck online. But with that said, in my time, I've met a lot of different people. I've done work for the Assistant Director of the FBI of the state of Michigan's office down in Detroit. I've been in the FBI offices in Bay County doing work there. I've been in countless banks, countless government buildings, countless jails, countless prisons, countless, government buildings and research places. I was in the Detroit ICE offices, although they wouldn't let me do anything there. They said, no, you're going to do all your shit outside. You're not coming in. But
okay,
everybody,
Tim,
all the other government agencies is down at the airport, down at Detroit Metro. All the other agencies down there, there was a CIA and there was the FBI. I mean, every little place had something there at the airport. And I was running communications in there for Comcast down there. I was in and out of these places all over the place. But so you meet a lot of different people. In the 80s, when I first started this, doing some hookups here in the local town for the local cable company, Billy Bresman, back in the day, met a couple old-timers I was hooking up on cable for the first time. So in the middle of town, not too many people didn't have cable. Well, one of these old-timers was a old World War II vet, and we got talking while I'm doing his install and stuff, and we were talking about the change of the scenery since, he got out of the war and my life, and I was just starting out of high school, so he was kind of, departing some words of wisdom, as it were. And one of the things that he said that really struck me, and it's always stuck with me, he said, in the 50s, everybody got out, we were in our neighborhoods, we had barbecues, everything was going along good, everybody was outside after the evening dinner, after talking about the evening news report, what was going on, who was doing what, how things were going, we were connected and aware. He says, but then the TV started coming in proliferately in the late 50s and early 60s. He says, I slowly watched everybody go off their porch and inside the house and shut the door. And he says, and today, almost nobody sits on their front porch and talks to their neighbor.
No, they don't.
And we wonder why things are messed up today. And that was 25 years ago, I was told that. And
what's the first thing people do nowadays? A friend of mine, he's one of the sheeple, one of my biker friends downstate. He's pissed, but he's not doing anything about it because they have a law.
Yep.
And I just might as well listen to the law, because that's another thing we were taught as bikers. If you do get busted, whether we think it's illegal or not, they have a law. You have to sit in your little cage.
Right.
I mean, and so that's where I had to have my breakout from. But he got in trouble for having his RV. And his neighbor didn't come over and say, hey, your RV is bothering me. Instead, he went and called the cops, and the cops came. And, of course, now in Warren, you can get a ticket and go to jail for it if you don't deal with it. And I'm sitting here saying, no, you should fight that, because we fought the camper ordinance here in Sheboygan, and we won it, so you should fight it down there, and you could win it because it's private property and they can't tell you. Well, but there's a law, and it just makes me want to go smack him. And he's a big, huge biker dude.
Yeah.
Because we've been ingrained in our neighbors.
Yep.
Rather than come over and say, hey, man, I love those brownies you gave me last week, but, your RV is really bugging me.
Right.
Do you remember as a kid neighborhood barbecues?
I don't want to be, sound, problematic. Here's some brownies, but your RV's bugging me. But yeah, this lack of communication, this, appeal to authority will take care of it for us. And now we got cases of parents seemingly trying to do the right thing, scare their kids a little bit who have been acting out, call the cops and tell the cops, hey, man, my kid's acting out, I want you to come over and scare them a little bit, and then come over and kill them. Literally, this has happened in this country.
Or they put them in jail.
A couple times.
I have a story right now, and I don't know if this woman's listening. She's here in Presque Isle County, so I won't say her name. She called the police, and this was a really weird one anyway, because she called the police from my county here in Forest Township. You would know better how to explain this to people. I live right on the county line almost. So she called from Sheboygan County, and Presque Isle County, who already had ties to the family and knew that there was some family history in the court system, showed up. And she called because her son hit her. And instead of being a normal, I'm just going to beat the crap out of my son or ground him or whatever you would do, she called the cops because they were going to teach him a lesson. Well, they took him to jail. Mm-hmm. And this poor woman is $60,000 in the hole because they convicted him of domestic violence, and she gets the lovely opportunity as the, perceived victim to pay for it.
Yeah, the perceived victim.
That's what happens
and
when you call.
Responsible parent for the adult or for the child, because she is financially culpable for anything that child does.
Right,
That's
and she
why
told them.
You are the parent.
And she even told them in court, first of all, she's the victim, so you have the Victim Rights Fund, but no one gave her any victim rights money or any victim rights help. Instead, they chunked her for the money because they wrote themselves a law.
Yep.
That you have to pay for it.
Exactly. They wrote themselves a law. And
so, she's trying to teach this kid a lesson. The cop is overzealous that day because the family already has a history with the courts. And boom. But she was taught that they take care of it. Do you know how many people I hear every day? Well, I'm just going to call the cops on them. I'm just going to call CPS on them. I hear it from people.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Why didn't you just go over to their house and find out if they need your help? Because, that's what you need to do.
We have been conditioned to appeal to authority on every level. It doesn't matter if that authority is the badge, the black robe, or the plumber because he's been paper trained in plumbing. We appeal to the next authority because you're too stupid to know anything except for the authority we paper trained you for. And that's the whole perception deception. It's pervasive everywhere. When you look at it and you look around, it's sickening to see because so many people are so willing, I'm getting mine right now, and placing the burden on our children in the process, and they don't even see it.
Now, see, I'm going to go a step further, and I don't know if I've shared this yet on the show or not. Uh-oh, why is that not working? I'm sharing you something right now. Hopefully, eventually it's going to happen. I can't make the internet work right now. I don't know why. Okay, let's try this again. Share, Tim. Okay.
You're going to share it through Facebook?
I'm trying to. Everyone who is listening, go to Tim's timeline or mine. I'm maybe going to send something. Let me just see if it shows up anyway. It is a little video of something that they're doing, and it could scare you because they're doing their drills. They're Jade Helm drills. Mm-hmm. And they're doing FEMA camp roundup drills. And it's quite an intense little video. And it talks about all the ways, if you read the Communist Manifesto, that they're going to fundamentally change our lives. Now,
what did Mr. Obama say in 2008?
He's going to fundamentally transform America.
We need to fundamentally transform America. We need a new police force, a federal police force. Mm-hmm. Now think about that when he said that in 2008, and think about the media push now with all the bad cop stories that we're getting. Why would they be pushing so many of these bad cop stories? Because your local cops are incompetent dupes and they need to be taken over by the federal police force.
And that was part of this video. You will watch this video and you'll see that's part of it. It shows us killing cops and cops killing us, and that is part of their plan.
I have been saying for 4 years, if we want to see what's coming tomorrow, we just need to go look at 1930, 1928, 1932 Germany. Because exactly what happened to the Weimar Republic is exactly the same thing that's happening today here, right in our own neighborhoods.
And all of it ties back to cannabis, no matter how you want to say it. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Any way you slice it, it all comes back, because if cannabis was
fundamental
not prohibited,
natural rights.
Right. Well, it's it's so much more pervasive than that, because let's look at the pharmaceutical issue. And what we know today about endocannabinoids, I mean, there isn't almost anything that eating cannabis, like a plant, like a lettuce, would not pretty much take care of for most people. I mean, anybody that listened to Steve Green's Full Melt show tonight got an earful on Monsanto, vaccines, glutaphosates.
Oh yeah, glutaphosates.
And a few other things. And they were very openly, his guests were very open about saying, no, they want to control cannabis because they know all this stuff, but they can't control it. This is where I'm saying they can't control it because it's prohibited. And if they took it to Schedule 2 and made it legal for them to deal with in the medical community only, and all this information come out, I mean, not only would the potheads revolt, but the hidden potheads revolt, and everybody else would start revolting. They need us to legalize it for them so they can take it over. This is the last kick of the can, and this is what I've been saying. I may sound batshit crazy to some people, but go look at the government flipping documents yourself. Don't believe me. I want you to get pissed off at me. I want you to hate me, but hate me so bad you want to prove me wrong.
Yes, because when you try to prove us wrong,
you're going to absolutely find
and you
out.
Actually research it.
You're going to come in and have a conversation.
Yes, because that's what I've learned. Those that, hang on, somebody's talking about the show. It is on now.
But yeah, I mean,
so
I
Mary
really
Ray's
don't
about
want
to
people
listen
to believe me. I don't want. I mean, yeah, I don't want people to think like me. Just think. For the life of anything that's alive, think.
Because everyone knows Chris Ann Hall is my hero. Everyone.
Oh, yeah,
they know that I listen to her and I know what she says. And I research everything she says because she tells you every couple of shows in, don't just take my word for it. Research everything I say. And everything she says is so easy to research because it's right in the Federalist Papers. It's right there. It's so simple. And we're seeing it because the reason I brought us around to this conversation is, we're talking about liberty and security, and I keep pushing that Ben Franklin comment out there more and more because people are blowing back on my little bridge walk protest. They're like, well, but it was for my safety, and I felt safer going across that bridge, and I have to keep telling them, well,
really?
I brought all kinds of people in bags across the bridge, and no one checked it. But because we've been told on these shows, these TV shows that we talk about, that doctors are good. So you better get your immunization because your doctor says it's good. And right before we lost our cable, we had that show that Will Smith's old lady's in, Jada Pinkett, whatever that show is where she's a nurse. And you look right outside the window of a room and it would say, get your flu shot.
Yeah.
For the safety of the people, get your flu shot.
This light subversive programming.
Yes.
It's really what it is. I mean, this goes
Read
back to
Orwell, 1984.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this goes back to what
prophetic.
I was talking about a couple of weeks ago. This, even our language. I mean, it sounds stupid easy, but it really is stupid easy. We watch a vision, and they give us programming over the vision. Now, that's just not coinkydink.
No. So, back to what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing all these people, safety, safety, safety. Well, Sheboygan County has 34,000 people, and Onaway, which is over to another county, but they both tie together with all of this, which all comes back to everything. Okay. Onaway has like 400 people. If you take all the kids in from all the areas, they still only have about 800 kids in the school. All 3 schools are still in one little building, and it's just small. But now, people, if you're listening from downstate, you're used to seeing cops in your schools now. Now, I was never used to seeing it. My kids didn't even have it. But now, up here, we just got our cop in the schools a couple of years ago, and at Onaway schools, there's a buzzer. If you are there between the time that they have their final bell and the time of the first bell, you have to buzz. And then they have a camera looking at you, and they get to choose whether or not you go through that door.
Yep.
And little old Onaway, Michigan, nobody comes here except in the summer.
Oh,
and our highest population during the summer is on 4th of July. We might have 10,000 people in our town.
But come on, we had an underwear bomber fly into Detroit. We got to be afraid. I mean, the FBI set up a guy in, Boston and set up this, drill, and we got to be afraid.
Just like our Michigan State Police said, because of the Boston bomber, we needed to have bag searches on the bridge. And everybody said, okay, yeah, in northern Michigan, in the middle of nowhere, not on a border, who gives a crud about our bridge walk?
Yep, because
we have to be searched for our safety.
Yep,
because
that's
of Boston.
A little step, because you know what's coming after the,
and that all happened, but they didn't start searching for the bridge walk until like last year. And this year was the second year. And then this year we get, but this year we get that button on the door of the school.
Yep.
And we get that.
You know what's coming next
year? And then,
year?
wait, you have to hear, our courthouse, there's a little thing now. It's a door. I've never seen this kind either.
Yep.
You come in, you have to shut the door.
They've had the bomb-proof courthouse entrance for 5 years in Midland now.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm wondering if it's
familiar.
because the small towns are rising up, because we've done a lot up here for freedom, and we fill up courtrooms, and we have jury nullification, and we yell at our planning and zoning, and we change laws, and I'm like, oh my God, did we bring the militant police here? But I guess it's everywhere now.
What's gonna happen next? In this, mark my words, this is going to be the next step in this. We're wasting too many resources on individual police to do this. We need body scanners. That's what's going to be next. They need body scanners in the schools. They need body scanners in the libraries. They need body scanners in the McDonald's. They're definitely going to need body scanners in the dispensaries. They're going to need body scanners to go into a free speech zone, to go out of a free speech zone. Everybody's going to have body scanners and TSA agents to man them.
And that is why we need to become a society like we were before the Industrial Revolution. Back to what America was. We get back to the back and forth between two, bartering for what you have. Stop chasing that shiny bauble. And I know now I sound like a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, but I will tell you my life has gotten easier since I lived that way.
Mhm.
And that's how we live here.
Like I said, I've kind of tried to live my life outside of the window as much as I could, looking in at the party, so to speak. But I can't get away from it. I got to use set of reserve notes, because when I go to Myers to buy food, they won't take anything out. So we are forced into the system, and when you really understand the money, or the fiat money, as it were, which wasn't always the case, that came in the late 70s, too. That was another big change after the, oil embargo and the oil crash of the mid-70s, where we had lines of cars getting filled up on every other day, depending on the license plate number.
I remember that.
Yep. A lot of our younger kids have no
that.
idea. They're going to hear me saying, lines for cars to get gas? You're crazy.
I know.
But no, because they haven't been taught what we lived just 35, 40 years ago. I was 9 years old when this was going on. But, so you can look at every position. And, and the reason it always ties back into this cannabis issue is because cannabis can do everything. If we were growing cannabis in the early 70s, there would have been no need for an oil embargo in the mid-70s.
No.
Because cannabis can make the oil and the gas and all the lubrications and all the plastics that, crude oil was making then, and they knew that. They knew that then.
And let's tie this into the Full Melt show with all those glucophosphates and all of those things and that Roundup Ready corn. we're destroying our atmosphere even faster with that ethanol
in our
than
bodies.
we ever would have with hemp.
Yep, in our bodies, exactly. I mean, this is going to be a leap of faith. I admit that fully, but I'm coming to believe the endocannabinoid system was more intricately known long before 1950, when Raphael and McCullum got his published works on the active ingredient THC. Because when you start looking back at what was actually written by the heads of the medical societies and even Eli Lilly in the 1890s, early 19th or 20th century, up until the 1910, 1920, had a lot of research on cannabis and its medical properties. And the depth of help it had, they knew back then there was more to cannabis than just this intricate connection that you got high off it. But let's
put that back into the perspective of Dow Chemicals, Monsanto, Roundup. Okay.
Yeah, that's all part of it. Here's
my little tie-in, and I always tie this in with people, and I do this a lot with those that say that, well, this is good for you. Monsanto's not bad. Okay, fine. So you think it's okay to eat Roundup Ready corn and all these things, and then they'll think, well, I'm not really sure it's okay to eat Roundup Ready corn. I'm like, well, you eat corn and you buy it at the grocery store, so probably. Well, I mean, I agree that we need it for fuel. Well, no, you don't really. I mean, some use it for fuel, but, whatever. So we have this corn, and we can spray it with Roundup, and then what's on the bottle of Roundup?
Mm-hmm.
A dandelion.
Correct.
Everyone who is listening needs to look at the dandelion flower because you can use every part of that plant just as you can cannabis.
Correct.
There are only 2 plants that I've ever found. There might be more, but maybe in my own limited research, I found 2 plants that every part of it can sustain you forever.
In some way, shape, or form, right.
Yes. It's medicine. It's enjoyment. It's whatever. Because with dandelion, you could take the flower and you can make wine.
Many years.
Yes.
I remember drinking dandelion wine in the 70s.
They take your little cannabis plant that is a survival food. It is a survival plant. You eat those leaves. They've got magnesium, selenium, all kinds of things that will make you well. So does the dandelion plant.
Yep, it does.
Okay.
That little yellow plant that grows in your yard that turns into the white puffballs that all the bees land on that everybody hates and wants to kill.
Yes. And your planning and zoning laws tell you that if you don't kill them, then you have violated planning and zoning laws, and now you're going to go to planning and zoning jail.
It's the fact.
Period.
They're on the books out there, people.
So think about it. You've got 2 plants that will save your life. One is on the bottle of Roundup, and they want you to kill it so that you cannot have it. And the other one was made illegal by our government. Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But they teach you, cops are good, lawyers are good, doctors are good, take our poison, walk through our metal detectors, walk through our fancy bomb door. Mm-hmm. Let us have your children to indoctrinate while we cannot let you get to them. Any parent that puts their child in the on-away schools is nuts right now.
Yeah,
or any
Perry
school.
Harris, one of the liberal talking points on MSNBC, has been spewing out for a year now. Your children are a ward of the state. You're just the babysitter.
We have to remember
children.
These aren't our children. They're everyone's children. That was another one of her commercials.
Hitler was saying the same thing.
It takes a village to raise a child, don't you know? That was one of Hitler's favorite things.
Correct.
And his village just made him psycho children.
And it does when you take the parent out of the house and put them in, forced work or put them in a position where they have to work somewhere else for long periods of the day, and they can't be there to raise their children because, that ability is not allowed for you.
See, and I love how conversations come back around because this is how we were starting when I took us on our side note.
Absolutely.
There is a way for the parents to stay home.
All the dots connect when you really start pulling the strings.
Right. So how do parents stay home? Think about it. Well, one of your biggest expenses right now is The grocery store.
Food.
Right. Okay. Now, this might not work for the people in the city, but you can implement a few of these things into your world. All right, you live in the city. Start with vegetables or herbs. Herbs, not just the cannabis herb, but the other ones. There's so many herbs out there that will save your life. Start getting things. Chamomile, comfrey, valerian. Valerian root is basically Valium, only without all the crap in it.
Yep.
Comfrey builds your
willow
bones.
Tree.
Right.
Willow
Basil.
tree bark is aspirin.
Right. Thank you. Aspirin. But, and then you've got all these things, and some of them grow wild in Michigan. Michigan has wild peas. They have the mushrooms. They have the asparagus. We have so many things that you could just walk out and gather if you learn what they look like. You could feed yourself just by walking through the woods in Michigan.
Yep. Animals do it every day.
Right.
And animals eat a lot more than we do sometimes.
Right. And even simple herbs, mint, it's good for your stomach. Catnip, it's good for calming you down. Lemon balm. Lemon balm. If you have AIDS, thyroid problems, shingles, anything that's autoimmune, make yourself lemon balm tea because it's an autoimmune fixer.
Mm-hmm.
Put it into a lip balm. It will help you with your herpes cold sore in the winter. It's just amazing. All the stuff that they make into these pharmaceuticals grows.
Sell you over the counter for $3 that you got to go work for.
Right. So you take those $3.
Fake money.
Yes. So you're growing your own medicine. You're growing your own vegetables. Well, if you have more than 2 acres of land. If you have 2 acres of land, you can sustain yourself totally. You can get chickens. You've seen what I have. I have 5 acres cleared. On my farm, my actual farm, including my house, is on 2 acres, maybe 3? 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have a very big open area.
No. And so, but I've got my pigs, I've got all my things.
Wood.
Right. And I have my woods. And my woods is where all the good stuff is.
My front yard is pretty full of trees.
But, so I've already solved one of your problems. You're not going to the grocery store as much. You're learning how to sustain yourself. You're growing your meat if you so choose to have meat. You're growing your vegetables. If you want vegetables, you're growing your medicine. So now most wives, because they have to pay for daycare, are only making enough to pay for the grocery bill.
Mm-hmm.
So why would a wife want to walk out that door and go work for someone else when they could just grow all of those things? Isn't that more simple? Because, while you're growing your own stuff, you can have a beer. You can smoke a bowl.
You can spend.
You don't have to brush your hair, put on makeup, buy pantyhose, buy pretty fancy dresses.
You can teach your children about what you're doing out in the garden.
Right, so that your children can feed themselves and not have to chase that shiny fiat dollar bubble. Okay, so that's one of the ways. What's another way that a family can save money? Homeschooling their children.
Absolutely.
So you're not buying school supplies and backpacks and special outfits and shoes and things. And we can train our children better than anything.
Extracurricular stuff, I believe, in a lot of homeschooling programs, your children can still be involved in sports at the school level.
Yes, they can. And they can go to dances, and they can go to anything the school's doing that's extracurricular.
Because
plus, there's other
places.
homeschooling families. You get together with them. You take them to museums. You go learn things. And that's the coolest part about it, because you're going to learn stuff. And there's so many curriculums. There's free ones through the state where they're still going to have Common Core curriculum. But there's ones that aren't through the state that aren't Common Core. There's even a kind of homeschooling that's called unschooling, which is where you just don't school your kid. And as long as you can prove your kid is learning,
and is
you're okay.
Passes the test.
Right.
Passes the accommodated, acceptable level test. Yeah, there's a lot of these things. We did some homeschooling with my daughter for a while, and it worked out quite well. But with the things like it was,
you put them in that school. You put them in that school, they lock the door, and they get to teach them anything. They get to teach them that we're a democracy. They get to teach them that, the founders were white slave-owning bigots. that women couldn't vote until we made the 19th Amendment.
Right.
They teach them all kinds of stupid lies.
Deceptions. The slavery one's a huge one because when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of what slavery was about, the business end of it, it wasn't about the slave part of it. It was just about, the business end of it. When you dig deep into it, you got to look at who really did all the hard work. I mean, and by hard work, I mean setting up the trade, setting up the routes, finding the tribe chieftains and tribe kings in Africa who would sell their, conquered neighbors for, baubles or whatever it was they were buying over there for their conquered people that they were giving away for nothing because they were just going to kill them as far as
Would you be talking about the Barbary Pirates?
Well, that would be a part of them. And who did they become? Who funded them?
ISIS? Oh, wait, sorry. Or are we calling it ISIL right now?
Right. But, when you look in the back of it, this is all connected. Because,
exactly.
we were talking a little bit earlier about, I bring up Hitler a little bit, and why this sounds absolutely insane. When you go back and look at the history, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded around the 1920s, and they were the group of Middle Eastern men that fought with Adolf Hitler in the Northern African campaign.
Mhm. I like it that you know that.
Not many people do, but you really go dig deep in the history, which, and these are the same people. It's part of the same group
that were the Barbary Pirates.
Well, and
yes.
We can call it.
And they were stealing black people and bringing them to America.
And where did they get the idea? From the English, the Goths.
Oh, well, yes, because the English were doing it.
The Irish were enslaved in England long before slaves came over long before there was an America. That's why a lot of people from England fled.
Yes, because if you look back into Old English,
we were slaves to the English system.
I didn't know where you were going with that. Now I got where you're going. Now you're getting into my ancestry. Yes, my ancestry was so riddled with all of that. And you get into what people call Christianity, which is really Catholicism for the most part, because most of the religions are Catholic. My ancestors, we were happy people. We were happy-go-lucky. We were like farming and doing our stuff. And then all of a sudden here comes
all their crap.
We were like doing our thing. We were medicinal people. We dealt with everything. The Irish people are strong. They're strong blood. They're strong core, and they live forever. And they drink a lot of mead, which we learned how to make early. But here comes St. Patrick, and this is where the King of England, he had an affair. And I talked about this a little the other night when we had the Church of England. Well, the same people that were Church of England came to Ireland, and they said, well, you can no longer, hang out at Stonehenge and do your thing. Now you have to be Irish or be Catholic. And they were like, no, we're good. We're happy. We have our little island, and it's really lush, and we have animals and things, and we're good.
They
said, nope, you really have to do this. And so they played this game, and with the hierarchy of Ireland that really wanted to have the king's support, don't you know? And they played this game with the people, and they put the Patrick in this little hole with all these snakes, and the next day the snakes were dead.
Yep.
And that was enough to make the people say, oh, we're going to become Catholic.
Right.
And that's how we became what we were. And then, of course, the king said, well, we like all those Irish women. We want them to clean our house.
Right.
And those Irish hands, they're really strong stock. They're going to go and be our horse maids and our plow people, and that's what they did.
Yep.
And my grandmother will tell you that story with great pride, and she's like, we lost. The Irish potato famine was because the king kept taking their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And all they had to survive on was dandelions.
And potatoes.
Because all their herd was taken. The king took it all.
Yep. And
we're still repeating that same history every day. Only now the king didn't come take our herd. They didn't come take our fields. They didn't come take all our stuff.
No,
they told us we need to get it at the grocery store, and we need to go chase a shiny bauble and get it. And it's no longer legal to grow gardens in certain parts of Pontiac or Warren or
They convinced you they could take it, so therefore it was easier to submit to the new system, even though it was wrong, than it was to face living up to how bad the new system would be.
And so there we connect the dots, and there it goes around and around.
Yep.
Patrick Henry, I have no light to lamp my path except for the light of history. Because history teaches me that it's going to happen again. And here we are. We go out and work, so we've gone around for full circle now. Every reason a woman has to work is to provide food and provide clothing for those kids for school.
Yep.
So we buck up, we man up, we take our schooling back where it was supposed to be.
In the home, in the local community, by the local community.
Because in the Constitution it does call for schools, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We should
but
educate our young so they cannot be fools.
Right, and school was only supposed to be for the very formative years, reading, writing, arithmetic. You only went to school when there wasn't a harvest or a plow or a planting. It was wintertime.
Because everybody was needed in the field.
Right. So that's why when your grandparents said, I walked to school through snow, uphill both ways. Well, that's the only time they went to school.
Yeah,
because there was nothing to do.
The rest of the year they're in the field planting and working and plowing. Yeah, exactly.
And in the summer you were getting fish and whatever to dry, to eat. And you know, my grandmother would talk about it. They even came to America and she was like a firstborn in America, but she still learned to grow and all those things, and she was like the home remedy person out in the garden or something.
Mhm.
And she was the last of her generation because she raised a bunch of kids that went to work.
Right.
And then raised their children to work.
Because we had World War II and everybody was off fighting and everybody had to work to, support the war and support our troops. Don't you know it? You had to go work. You had to pay income taxes to help support the war and support the troops so we could beat the dirty Nazis. And the reason we were fighting the dirty Nazis was all,
for the same thing we have now.
The show. I mean, it really just a show. Mm-hmm. There's evidence showing out there, or at least some documentation showing that, there's strong possibility that Hitler is actually the bastard son of the King of England, who makes Hitler the half-brother of the Queen of England, the longest reigning monarch in England's history that we just heard of. I mean, there's always been conspiracy theories that, he was the bastard child of Amschel Rothschild, or one of the Rothschild people. Yes. Because it's an absolute documented fact, his mother was the kitchen maid in the Rothschild house. So that's a fact. The question is, who is Hitler's father? Is it really, his, old man Adolf Hitler, who I think, Hitler was a junior, when that was his, given father's name. But was it really Rothschild's, or, who was it the King of England, who was the Rothschild's friend and confidant, and was there all the time? So was World War II a family affair?
Well, the Rothschilds paid for all the parts of it. The Rothschilds gave Russia some money, they gave America some money, they gave Germany some money, they gave France some money.
They owned the central banks in all the countries. I mean, it was the three Rothschild brothers who went out and they started the central bank in England, the central bank in France, and eventually the central bank in America. And
wait a minute, let's connect those dots again. Were the Rothschilds involved in cannabis prohibition?
Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun. Yes, they were.
Who owns the Rockefeller Foundation, or at least parties up with the Rockefeller Foundation?
The Rockefeller family is tied in with the Rothschilds. They have family in common.
Yes, they do. They've intermarried.
Follow the timeline. See?
Yep, those are the same
family. It all connects, everyone. When you take a vital part of our world and you make it illegal, it's going to connect. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon again.
Yeah, 7 degrees of separation.
But I like to do the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon because that was like a pop culture thing.
Right. But yeah,
but,
exactly.
I mean,
it is, yeah. Because you go back there and then you find out that, it was Rockefeller's grandfather or father, old man, the original Rockefeller back in the 1800s. His father was actually what we would actually today title a snake oil salesman. He was one of these, carpetbaggers who went from town to town and duped people. He died, and they buried him in an assumed name grave, so people didn't know it was actually him. He was so hated because of everything that he had done and all the people he had screwed. A lot of people don't realize that's, the founding of the Rockefeller fortunes, who then became the foundational financial backing of what is today the medical, pharmaceutical industry. They control all of it.
And what was the name of the people that brought the Prussian education system, which told our parents that we had to work and everybody had to work? Carpetbaggers.
Yeah, carpetbaggers, right.
Yeah. And then let's put our little tinfoil hats on even more. So we have the Rockefeller family, and they've done everything, and this family and that family. Stalin. No, wait. Abraham Lincoln, who was evil, we've already determined that, was a fan of Stalin. Or Lenin.
No, Lincoln. Yeah, no,
Lenin.
It wouldn't be Lincoln. Yeah, well, Lincoln was dead long before Lenin.
Stalin.
No, Stalin was. Yeah, Lincoln was dead long before those guys. It wasn't Lincoln you're thinking about.
The predecessor to Lenin and Stalin. See, this is another one of those where I should have grabbed all my books. Well, I have all my books on my shelf, but it's what one do I want? But
right.
Lincoln was a fan of Stalin.
There was
Lenin.
somebody over. Yeah, I know
Lenin,
who you're referring. But if this is before.
But anyway, and then Stalin and Hitler were fans of Lincoln because they all had the same ideology. I just have to think through who it was.
Yeah, I can't think of it either.
Because it was Hitler and Stalin in Russia. It was Lenin. Lenin was before.
Yeah, because Lenin was around because Lincoln died in 1865, and Lenin wasn't a thing until the early 1900s, the late 1800s.
1870 was when he was born.
Yeah, right. So I mean, maybe it was
Who did he
Stalin was very fond of Lincoln.
All right. Well, my homework is going to be for tomorrow to find out who was prior to Lenin, because it was Lenin's predecessor.
Well, at one point, at that point, when you get back to the late 1800s in Russia, it was Tsar Nicholas and the
Nicholas. Yes.
Tsar Nicholas and the Prussian family who
was.
Yes,
the Prussian family. Tsar Nicholas. That would be it.
Right. And now Tsar Nicholas and his family were murdered by the Bolsheviks in the early 19 teens, which is where Stalin got into power, because Stalin was leading the Bolsheviks. So Stalin murdered Tsar Nicholas and all of his family 5 lineages out. So they had no.
But even Nicholas's family wasn't
coronational authority to reclaim the throne down the line.
But even Nicholas's family wasn't good.
Well,
they were already
Nicholas. Well, see. Now this is where I'll come in with the idea that some of what we've been told about Lincoln is revisionist, because you're right. Tsar Nicholas and Abraham Lincoln were, cohorts. They knew each other. They talked to each other, as heads of states, back in the time. Tsar Nicholas also refuted and hated the Rothschild family and the idea of a central bank. Now, I go back to this idea of this, Lincoln had some major problems going on, but I think he was being deceived in some extent, because he did the one thing the central banks at the time in our country couldn't have, was instituted the greenback dollar, because he was against that central bank control. Because when you really look at the Civil War, you find out the central banks, as we know, were funding both sides. They were funding the South and the North. And I think Lincoln found that out, and that's when he issued the greenback, realizing what was going on. And that's why they killed him. But Tsar Nicholas was a big fan of Lincoln and what he was doing, and the fact that he issued the greenback, because he hated the Rothschilds, because under his father, the Tsar of Russia at the time, or Prussia at the time, the Rothschilds tried to trick him into a banking deal, and they caused some problems, and took a while to run the central banking system out. So when you come back around, now you come back in the early teens, where we get our Federal Reserve Bank of 1912, comes into play in 1913. In 1914-15, Tsar Nicholas is slaughtered by the Bolsheviks, led by Stalin, funded by Trotsky, who was funded by the very same people who set up and was running the Rockefeller Foundations, the Rockefellers themselves.
So you think Lincoln had an about face, and that's why they killed him?
Absolutely. The fact that he issued the greenback dollar, no interest, no money, no loan, just like Benjamin Franklin did with the colonial script, and they shot him in the head shortly after that. A lot of people don't realize John Wilkes Booth was an agent of what was known at the time as the British East India Trade and Holdings Company.
Yes.
Or Trade Company and Holdings. Literally, BEITCH, the literal bitch. The bitch is back was about the British East India Trade Company and Holdings coming back in and setting up shop.
Now, I knew that, but I thought that was just show.
Nope, that's literal.
Because I've read lots on that.
Absolute literal.
I have read a lot on that, and I knew that he was paid by them, and I knew they never recovered a body. Because that's something I learned really early on, that when they burned down the barn, they didn't find the right number of bodies, and they never displayed a body. And back then, they always displayed a body, even if it was charred.
Well, we're told John Wilkes Booth was an actor. You know what else John Wilkes Booth was?
An
activist? Slave trader.
Oh, he was a slave trader. Yeah, we know that.
He was the guy who got the slaves off the ships and sold them to the southern plantations, who took loans from banks, who took loans from the British East India Trade Company to give loans to the plantation owners to hire the new slaves before they started shipping in the opium, just like they did in China. Because you go look at the Opium War in China, and look what happened there, and then apply slavery in America pre-Civil War, and it's almost the same story, and the same people authored it.
Yep.
That's woo crazy conspiracy side there, ladies and gentlemen. But these are documented facts. John Wilkes Booth was a slave trader for British East India Trade Company who had loaned out all the money to all the banks in the South and then bring in opium like they did in China and started getting everybody addicted, including the plantations owner. The plantations started failing. When they couldn't make their mortgage payments to the little banks started failing, and who foreclosed on the little banks? British East India Trade Company. At the same time, they were funding the North build up because of the Southern trade, the Southern slavery issue. They fomented the problem.
Well, see, and that's where the North, under Lincoln, put the tariffs on.
The South.
They put the tariffs on, saying that because you have slaves, you have to pay a higher tariff. That's where the two sides are funded.
Yep, because the same people were telling...
Because Lincoln didn't give two shits about black people. He hated them.
I wouldn't go so far as he hated them, but I would say Lincoln absolutely knew them coming here was wrong for them as well as us, because it was totally out of what they knew as their life and their culture.
In one of his speeches, you can read where he said...
They're inferior, absolutely.
They're inferior people, and we need to move them to another island, and we need to get them out of our country. Hold on.
I hear you.
He hated the freemen. He said the freemen are uppity. And then he also said, now we have to put a tariff, and we have to keep this union together no matter what.
Yes,
which violated the 10th Amendment.
Because at the time he believed the people who were funding him were not part of the same group. He believed they were separate in backing the American dream, as our founding fathers put it. And I believe that's when he found out that they were the same group of people, they were working in cohorts. That's when he issued the greenback.
I'm going to have to do a little more Lincoln checking,
John Wilkes Booth, the agent from the very same groups that was setting it all up.
Because I do know the first shot fired that was always said to be fired by the Southerners was not really fired by us. And I'll say us
wasn't fired by the North either. That's the key.
It was fired by desperate men that could not. It was fired by desperate men who couldn't get food. That's what started the war. Because the South had said, please remove. Because the South said, please remove your men from Fort Sumter. They wrote a letter. They said, we're we're not buying your game. We're not playing anymore. We want you to remove your men from your base.
Right.
And he told them, remove them from the fort. And
right.
And when they defied his orders to remove the men,
some of the Southern generals understood what was going on down south. They really seen what was happening.
Right.
Well,
this was a Southern general. He said, "Please remove your men from the fort."
Right.
And then when they put the barricades up, so the tariffs were going north, so no trade was going on. The borders were shut, and these men were stuck in Fort Sumter.
Yeah.
They were stuck there, and they got hungry, and they went and shot a farmer, and may or may not have raped his wife and children, and I do believe the South Side is true on that, and they did rape them. But it'd been a while. This had been going on for 6 months or a year. They were hungry, they were starved for women, and they went and did their business, and the South found out about it, and that is when they fired on the fort and started the war.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is all tied together in the long run. Even though this group out of Fort Sumter, did what they did,
but they were
put in the position they put in by the very groups that led both sides to what we call the Civil War. All over control, because as soon as Lincoln, I believe you're right, and the South was making the redress because with what they had been through, some of the generals knew what was happening with the plantations, how they were getting foreclosed out, and knowing that those plantations were getting foreclosed out on banks that were getting, foreclosed out on by British East India Trade Company again. So I think they, seen what was going on, and I think eventually Lincoln found out the right information and seen that and went, oh boy, because he had some very strong misgivings about the war itself. Now, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the idea that, he wasn't fond of slaves, but I think there was more to it than him just hating black people. I think it had to do, again, with he understood that this was completely out of their element, what they're being thrown in for. They were not willing participants, and they had no means of even speaking the language, let alone the ability to beg for food.
Which is the one step up that the Irish had. We could speak the language. We could eventually work our way out of servitude.
But that aside, I think Lincoln, because you read what's been going on for the writings on him over the last 40 years, is dramatically different than it was up until we got this big shift in our education system. So I got to question what we're being told now, even though we're in the age of information. At least right back to, we really got to go back to the source of the information we're being told and see if we're being told everything.
Well, what we're being told now is that Lincoln is wonderful and he freed the slaves. That's all they tell us.
Now, see,
even in my high school
I hear
rule.
Completely. Yeah, see, I mean, as far as school
what
goes.
were you told about Lincoln? Seriously.
Well, yes, in high school, yes.
He was president, and he wrote the
Emancipation
Proclamation.
Right. But see, I did my own research even back then. Lincoln was one of my, fascinations, because I've seen the coinky-dink, if you will, between what happened to Lincoln and what happened to Kennedy. I grew up in a time where my family were conservative Democrats. Those two words sound very controversial put together in today's mindset, but the conservative Democrat was the hard-working middle-class American of the 50s. It didn't matter what color you were.
Right.
You worked in a hard deal job, and you tried to make the life so your wife could have a good life and raise the kids. That was a conservative Democrat, but by the mid-'70s, that was kind of going out the door.
Right.
Well, we got about a minute and a half left, maybe a couple minutes. We can always run over a little bit, but tomorrow's September 11th, and there's a whole lot of things on that in the idea of perception, deception that we go over. I want to spend a little time on it tomorrow, but not too much, because it's been kind of beat out, but we need to touch on some important topics, and there's a few things in what December or September 11th is a perfect lead into this whole idea of the body scanners, and we got to check your bag at the bridge. It's all connected, because it all goes down to controlling you and what you do, and that's exactly what the cannabis situation is. not about the cannabis. It's about your interaction with it and controlling it. And now that we know that it can heal so much, it's more about controlling it so you don't get the thought that, oh, geez, why don't I just take this for myself like I should have in the first place? So yeah, what you got to close out? Anything?
Perception, deception. I do like that. I really do.
Yeah, I think it sums up nicely what we're under.
Mhm.
So
and the cognitive dissonance that goes with it.
Mhm. Yeah. That's what breeds it. We have our perceptions here to, follow what we're being told by the authorities and to research it ourselves.
And
so come on back tomorrow night and we'll pick up where it's left off.
Have a good night, Tim.
What was that?
I said, have a good night, Tim. Oh, I said, and the
too.
Supreme Court makes law.
Yeah, exactly.
The 10th Amendment doesn't matter. We're not allowed to secede.
Right.
The same things they were telling Lincoln.
Obey.
Back to those dots.
Obey. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow night.
All right, be safe.
Thanks,
Bye.
Dana. Bye. No, there it is. A quick another show.